Amazing.
I'm good. I'm on a podcast.
Yeah, you are.
What an exciting day.
Very exciting day. Cassie and I have both pumped ourselves full of coffee, so we're particularly energized. I don't know, Jamie, are you a coffee drinker?
Yeah, but I'm also just like this naturally.
That's true. I can personally verify that as someone who's been with you at 9 a.m. It is afternoon for our East Coast listeners right now, but it's morning for Cassie and I out on the West Coast. We're super happy to be here. Anyone who's tuned in to listen, thanks for joining us. My name is Claire Martin, and I'm the Assistant Artistic Director of Sweet Tea Shakespeare, and I am thrilled and honored and delighted to be joined today by two of my favoritist colleagues and most wonderful friends. This is Jamie Sanders. Wave, Jamie.
Hello.
And Cassie Fastabend.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me today.
Both of these rock stars have actually appeared on the podcast before. Cassie has the distinguished or maybe dubious honor of being my first ever interview guest after being hired by Sweet Tea Shakespeare back when I didn't know how any of this, any of these technological appliances worked or how to do anything on the platform. She graciously agreed to be my first chat. And I was able to chat with Jamie over the summer. He was another interview guest. So I'm so happy to have them back on the show. I'm very grateful to them for giving up part of their Sunday to do this with me. They are both actors and currently both performing in an upcoming audio drama for Sweet Tea Shakespeare that is part of our digital restoration series, otherwise known as the DRS, which is an 8-month all-digital exploration of restoration and 18th century theater, which I am spearheading and which is sponsored by the R18 Collective, a digital society of scholars, artists, and dramaturgs who specialize in restoration and 18th century drama. The show that we are currently working on and about to record is George Etheridge's blistering early restoration satire called The Man of Mode, first written and produced in 1676, right during the first wave of the really bonkers, broad restoration comedies. I don't want to say too much about it because I want to give our actors that right. But suffice it to say, it's been a rollicking time. We've been working for 3 weeks now, and we are about to enter our recording week, where we'll be capturing all the audio that we will then strip and polish up, and we will add period music and sound effects and stereophonics, and we will release it as an immersive 5-part experience radio play on our podcast, the Sweet Tea Shakespeare Hours. So Cassie, Jamie, thank you so much for joining me today. Before we start talking about your specific characters and your role in the story, I would love for both of you to just kind of speak to The Man of Mode as a play. What's it about and how has it been to work on?
Well, I guess I'll go first. The Man of Mode as a play is very different for my character, I feel, than a lot of the other characters. Part of that is I play a character named Mrs. Loveit, and she is, I think we decided 30 or early 30s. We were like right around there, single woman who is having this passionate affair. Passionate is a word I can choose for their relationship. We'll get more into that. With the sort of protagonist character, main guy, Dormant. And she's only in 4 scenes, I believe, 4, maybe 5, 4, Claire?
4.
Yeah, out of the entire play. Those scenes are incredibly meaty, and there's a lot that happens during them. But for Loveit, really a lot of her trajectory in the play takes place in pretty much the same place. So for her, the play's a little bit different. She doesn't do too much. She has like 1 outing, 2 outings, I think, in the whole play. But I know Jamie's character, Sir Fopling, does a lot more out in the world and interacts with Dormant out in the world. So Jamie, do you want to talk a little bit about?
Of course. Well, I think to the uninitiated person, this is the story of a gentleman named Dormant. I say it wrong.
Yes,
because
you do.
I have a very bad French accent, which is part of my character. But for everyone else, it is Dormant. I've had to train myself not to say it correctly, while everyone else had to train themselves to say it. You get it. But he is one might say, one of those guys who is mean and bad to women,
Yeah.
but is also good at romancing them, and so engages in activities with them that some might find raunchy or inappropriate for the time period. But he does it repeatedly and with great fervor. The way my character fits into this is I am an old friend of his from well, not from, but currently residing in Paris, who speaks with an affected French accent and speaks in French, which was a real journey for me and continues to be a real journey for me. But I have to keep reminding myself that this character, Sir Fopling Flutter, is not actually French, and so the worse I do, the better I'm playing the character. So, but my character is the Fop. I mean, the word Fop is in his name, so my job is essentially to be as unaware of everyone else's emotional state as possible. Enter the scene, act like I'm the main character, annoy the heck out of the actual main character, Dormant, and then kind of excuse myself until the next time I do that.
Uh-huh.
And that is my relationship to the play. But there's some stuff that happens in between, Fopling's scenes. But really, it's just the entire plot of the show is all. But what we're all here for is to see me, Sir Fopling, walk in and talk about my clothes, or taking a bath, or romancing, for example, Cassie's character. We have a couple of interactions, and both of those interactions are very different. In one of them, I am being led to believe that I am succeeding. In the other one, she makes it very clear that no, I am not succeeding. I am in fact failing miserably, and I like doing both of those scenes. Both of those are a lot of fun.
Yeah. I think something important to note is that Jamie and I really enjoy working with each other. So let's do the play, and you're listening to our scenes, at least the ones where I'm incredibly mean to him, just know that we really do like each other.
Acting.
Yes, and a very important disclaimer, especially for this play, in which pretty much every character with a sizable chunk of dialogue is on the spectrum of just being an awful person. Like, this is a deeply bitter and cynical play that is excoriating about London society during the early Restoration, especially London society of the sort of elite tier. And that is a tier to which both Mrs. Loveit and Sir Fopling both belong. And this play takes a really hard look at the kind of showy cruelty of the elites, the way that they weaponize their wit against each other to appear the smartest and cleverest and sharpest and kind of most alluring person in the room, often at the expense of other people. And the play itself really doesn't lend much in the way of a redemption arc to the leading character, even though Dormant is a classic Restoration rake. As Jamie said, somewhat delicately, he's a libertine, which means he will essentially sleep with anything with a pulse, and flits from woman to woman, from pleasure to pleasure, in this very kind of hedonistic way, because all he really cares about at the end of the day is satisfying himself. And the carnage he wreaks in the lives of other people, in the hearts of other women, really don't matter much to him. And Etheridge just doesn't really give him much space to grow or learn from that. The play is more about exploring what the psychology of someone like that, like how a psychology like that sort of manifests and how it impacts the people in his life. However, all the actors really like each other. We promise. So as you listen to a barrage of scenes in which there seems to be a sort of constant theme of picking out the runt of the litter and just mocking them mercilessly, even though that is the mode of the show, it is very much not the mode of the rehearsal room. This has been a really wonderful process, and a deeply funny one, because we have a lot of actors in the room who are just genuinely lovely, gregarious, enthusiastic humans who have like hurled themselves into the task of playing these often revolting figures of like wealth and decadence. And they're, our goal was never to justify the behavior of any of these people, but rather to interrogate it. And in that, I mean, the cast has just, succeeded on every possible level. And they're such sort of wonderful humans. with such good hearts that we can collectively laugh at the characters, and even as they laugh at each other. So the play, as both Cassie and Jamie have said, follows this guy Dormant, who's this 24-year-old rake. He is young, he's hot, he's kind of rich. He's like fake rich because he has a lot of stuff, but he's out of cash. He lives in what I think the equivalent today would be like a penthouse in London. He's quite good looking, and he knows it, and he just takes great joy in seducing as many women as he can. And then once he's sort of finished with a woman, he takes even more joy in breaking off the relationship with like a bitter, nasty, screaming feud, because he's always looking for the next diversion. And sometimes getting in a fight is as good of a diversion as having sex. And we sort of follow him through these three strands of a sexual relationship. The first is with Mrs. Loveit, which is coming to a bloody end after this very passionate fling. He is trying to end it, and it just proves harder and more vicious than Dormant initially thought to break off this understanding. The second is a sort of he's in the middle of a venture with a young woman who just happens to be Mrs. Loveit's friend, named Belinda, and Mrs. Loveit does not know that her best friend is sleeping with the guy who has broken her heart. And so we sort of see the middle of that relationship as they're navigating, sort of keeping it a secret from Loveit. And then the third strand is we see him at the very beginning of a seduction when he has first set his sights on a hot young thing and is determined to seduce her.
Right?
Now that is a sequel I would absolutely watch. Dormant realizes he's secretly in love with Sir Fopling all along.
I mean, he talks about me all the time.
He does.
He tries to be me at one point. It's an obsession, I think.
I mean, that to me is where like terms like hate sex first got coined, right? Like, no, the third young woman is named Harriet, and she's an heiress who's actually from the country, and she and her rather sort of upright, moralistic, Malvolio-esque mother have come in from the country to London, and Harriet is ready to play the game of high society. She's ready to love and be loved, as Helena would say from The Rover. She's ready to cut loose and be a bit of a rebel. And we see Dormant sort of set his sights on her, but then struggle once he realizes that in terms of wit and intelligence, Harriet can actually dish it back as good as she gets, which makes her a little bit more of a challenge and therefore a little bit more interesting to him. Meanwhile, into this sort of like tangle of these three juggled love relationships, sex relationships, we have Sir Fopling Flutter, who at the beginning of the play has arrived, as Medley says, piping hot from Paris. He's a fashionista who is originally British, but is kind of an expat who's been living in Paris and is completely in love with French culture. He's a pure Francophile, and that actually manifests even in his speech. As Jamie says, he's doing a pretty ridiculous bad French accent. I was going to say good, but it's not good. It's just absurd. But that works. That's exactly right for the character.
Thank you.
And Sir Fopling is wonderful because in a play that can often veer into almost like grotesque wit and cruelty, Sir Fopling is this gust of fresh air because he is a genuinely earnest, idealistic, kind of like buoyant presence. Who just genuinely wants to be friends with everyone and thinks that deep down he can be friends with everyone and that he can succeed in true love. And even though that sort of optimism betrays a real lack of, as Jamie said, self-awareness, he actually, that innocence kind of protects him from the savagery of sort of some of the other London elites, like Cassie's character, Mrs. Loveit. Who definitely knows how to wield her words to hurt people.
Pretty much her.
What'd you say?
That's pretty much her main goal.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yep. And basically we just sort of, we watch these characters just get themselves into all sorts of sticky situations. There's masks, there's fiddles, there's dancing, there's some really sort of strange meta commentary about mirrors. Oh, here comes the mask. Put it on, Jamie.
You can't see. Jamie has what? Did you fasten that yourself?
I did.
I think he did.
Artistry.
It's a mask.
On a stick.
It's a mask attached to like a pencil, and he's just holding it to his face.
Oh my god.
Meanwhile, Cassie has her own prop, which is a paper fan that she shreds to pieces. I'm sure she's going to pull it out now. Yep, there it is, paper fan. And in one of her first scene, I think her first scene, she just shreds it in anger because she's a woman who burns bright. And this is our crazy little play. It is immensely joyful. The play is so much fun. It's deeply funny. I have absolutely loved rehearsing it with them.
It like, to someone who doesn't know the genre that much of this kind of theater, the play kind of feels like to me a cross between like The Importance of Being Earnest and like John Tucker Must Die. Like, yeah. Like there's not quite exactly either of those, but there's almost this feeling of like the well-to-do society, and like the well-made play almost kind of feels like it's like 200 years off of a well-made play almost, but it's like that kind of reminds me of the Ernest era, but then like it has all of these crazy love triangles, you know, it's like a modern comedy.
Right. And that's another subplot. We have this absurd Bonkersville love triangle between these two young ingenue lovers who are secretly in love, and then his dad also falls in love with her, even though she's like a third of his age. And it's just the most awkward love triangle you can imagine. Like, imagine trying to date someone that your father is also trying to date. That's the inanity of that triangle. So there's just a lot of really colorful characters. Like, they're all fascinating, and the way that they play off each other is just a source of like continual delight. Like, there's no grouping of characters from this play that aren't fun to see together, because they all have such different energies. And the joy of the text is kind of in seeing how they adapt to these sort of different social scenarios, and how they adapt to the different people that they're forced to contend with. We see a very different Dorimant with Sir Fopling Flutter, who he hates, than we do, you know, when we see Dorimant with his new young piece, Harriet. I want to talk a little bit about the title, and specifically in relation to Jamie's character, because this play is called The Man of Mode. We didn't lie about that. But it has a subheading. Etheridge, the full title of the play, according to Etheridge, is The Man of Mode, or Sir Fopling Flutter. Jamie was mouthing along with me because he's heard me say it so many times. Sir Fopling Flutter, as Jamie said, is the name of the fop. He arrives in Act 3 the way a proper, like, you know, new element fop should in a restoration comedy. And he's very unique in the sense that he doesn't actually impact the plot so much, but he becomes very central to the play, which is probably why his name is in the title, because from Sir Fopling we actually learn so much about Dorimant himself, and perhaps why he is so unhappy. So, Jamie, how has it been for you to play this character, and where do you see Sir Fopling fitting and being situated in like the matrix of this play?
Well, like you said before, and I was thinking about this too before we even started recording, when I was like, what am I going to say during this podcast about the guy who shows up and impacts the plot, but not really. And the thing is that when Fopling says something, he really, really means it. And that's been so freeing for me, because I'm trying to figure out this accent. I'm trying to speak in French occasionally. So the fact that everyone else is, you know, they're having all these asides and all of these moments. I have one aside, and it's me being confused about Mrs. Loveit not being as interested in me as previously. I go, why is she so cold? Why is she not responding to me? And that's my one aside. Everything else is just very straightforward. It's like, oh, you are so nice. Oh, we will fit together. Oh, we are friends. Oh, this is great. And it's just it's insufferable because everyone else is so kind of hiding things.
Yeah.
Everyone else is not wearing their heart on their sleeve. And so when Fopling walks in wearing his heart on his sleeve, I think that in modern society, Fopling would probably also be pretty annoying. But I like to think that like the people who I hang out with would kind of see Fopling and not be quite as off-put in a vulgarity-based way. They wouldn't be like, he's awful. They'd be like, oh, he's a little much, but his heart's in the right place.
Right.
You know? And so it's like he's this guy who's fallen in with the wrong friend group because he doesn't realize that it's the wrong friend group, and because societally that's his choice, that's his option, and so he's like, I feel like the worst parts of who Fopling is are elements that he is expected to take on by the culture of the time, and that otherwise he would have just been a kind of clueless but ultimately harmless person, as opposed to a kind of little too forward, like leave the ladies alone, Fopling. It's okay. You're good. Stick to your clothes. He's a fashionista. He loves his clothes. Honestly, he talks more passionately about clothing than he ever does about any female character.
Yep.
So,
sure does.
So part of me goes, just stick with what you're good at. Everyone always compliments it. Even the people who are talking trash about him, they do make fun of him, but they have to admit he's well dressed or
Yep.
extravagantly dressed.
Well, and I think that you put your finger on something really important, which is that in a society that seems overrun with manipulation and duplicity, everyone is running cons on everyone else. Everyone else is trying to play mind games against everyone else, especially Loveit and Dorament. Oh my God, their mind games are next tier. Sir Fopling is earnest, and he's sincere and authentic in a way that that I think actually threatens a lot of people in this world. So like they can think he's annoying, but I think deep down, we're in the darker parts of themselves they don't want to acknowledge, they kind of envy him, because Sir Fopling at least seems to have a chance to be happy because he believes in happiness, which just sets him miles above a deeply, deeply cynical, brooding, sort of self-loathing hurricane that is Dorament, right? Who just does not believe in true love or happiness, so seems pretty much doomed never to have it. Sir Fopling at least has a chance because he buys in. And in I think every Restoration comedy, one of the reasons I love this genre is because I think they really interrogate artifice, and often the human cost of presenting a certain way, right? Of making yourself look and sound elegant, poised, witty. Not that any of those adjectives are inherently bad, but when you care more about seeming that way to other people than to actually being kind to other people, when you see the rest of the world as competition as opposed to community, you just set yourself up for profound unhappiness and alienation. And in every Restoration comedy, there tends to come a moment or two where the characters take the artifice off. Sometimes deliberately, or sometimes one person does it and then the other person is compelled to do it almost against their will. Often these are the really wonderful love scenes. But, there tends to be in every Restoration comedy, like, at least one character who's, like, hunting for authenticity or is very authentic in a world of artifice. And Jamie played Witwoud in The Way of the World, which I was also in. And, part of the magic of that play is that there is a scene, essentially, where, the girl tries to lay out a prenup through artifice and wit, and the man that she's in love with just teases her about it, which basically tells her, like, I see through this, and I really don't care what you say. Like, I'm gonna love you anyway, and I actually kind of love you for being this absurd, but at the end of the day, like, all of this is nonsense. You need to understand that all of this is nonsense. All the artifice is nonsense. Because I love you. And I think Sir Fopling he's a really wonderful element in this, like, periodic table of weird characters, because he is sincere. And one of the things I love about you, Jamie, is that you have full access to, like, the heart chakra always, and you can just always sort of go straight down and offer, like, true, genuine emotionality. And so even as absurd as Fopling is, he's desperately sweet and so easy to love. So if anyone is interested in seeing the performance, like, I would almost say the show is worth coming to just to see Jamie bound in Act 3, and put everyone else to shame with his open-heartedness. So that's Sir Fopling. And then, Cassie, I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about Mrs. Loveit, because you're playing a pretty iconic Restoration lady.
Yeah. So I'm really excited to be playing this character. She is extremely different than any character I normally get typecast in, and that's exciting to me too. She is kind of vicious if she were an animal, she reminds me like of like a Wolverine almost. Like she's kind of like has these moments where she just is snarling and biting, and her intention is to harm a lot of the time, especially dormant. So yeah, I feel like she's the kind of woman who, one of my main questions for her is, has she ever experienced true reciprocal love? And I don't know the answer to that yet. I'm still kind of figuring that out with her. And I continue to ask myself that because as I'm building backstory outside of the play with this character, it seems difficult for me to imagine her really being in a relationship that was truly reciprocal. She loved that person and they loved her at the same level of respect and love. Dormant is like one whole, it's almost like she's way more attached to him and that relationship. And we see that through all of their sort of blow ups, that he's really ready to end it. And she's kind of like feigns that she's ready to end it most of the time. And then eventually we see that she's really, really going to be hurt and attached for a while. But then there's Sir Fopling, right? There's someone who's like really interested in her that she like doesn't want anything to do with, but uses. So I feel like in her life, there's been these two sort of extremes. And something I'm interested in for her is if she has experienced that type of love with a person before, what was that like? So much of what we see with Loveit is really just about Dormant. There's not too much that we find out about her aside from like this one relationship. So most of my questions for her have really been based off of that. But she's she's a smart lady as well. She's fast on her feet. And that's the thing that I like about her because she's funny. Especially some of the fights with Dormant when they really get going. She can like crack a whip back at him and leave him sort of flabbergasted on the other end. And she's funny when she does it. So that's part of what I like about her and makes her a little more human to me. She's not just abusive. She's abusive to him a lot of the time and to other people around her, but she's funny. She shows.
I think if Ron were here, Ron is playing Dormant, he would say Dormant deserves it. Like, I don't know if all of the victims of Mrs. Lovett's savagery deserve it. I think Dormant most of the time does. Sir Fopling, Jamie, Sir Fopling definitely doesn't deserve her cruelty. But, I mean, Dormant is pretty awful to her. And so, when she's cracking the whip at him, I would say it's probably arguable every single time that she's fully justified in doing it. You had said, Cassie, that you see her as kind of having these two extremes of being overly attached to the other person, not reciprocating at that level, or of being totally disdainful of someone who loves her a lot, like Sir Fopling. I think that Mrs. Loveit is a character who operates in extremes. She seems to me like a true fire sign in the sense that, like, she is deliriously happy or, like, ferociously angry. She just burns bright and hot. And again, not necessarily a bad thing. She certainly has the ability as a single woman of her own money, right? She has full control over her money, which was kind of unusual during the Restoration. That autonomy has given her the ability to lean into her wild emotions because she doesn't have male authority figures in her life sort of tamping down on it, right? So she can burn bright in a way that other characters like Amelia can't. But also she just seems to be the sort of person who just feels bigly. That's not an adverb, is it, Jamie?
I see where, yes, bigly works for her. Yes.
Yeah. But there is this sense of extremism in her fights with Dormant. Like, they're either, the way I described it to Ron way, way, way back when we were first starting to talk about this project, like months ago, I had told him that in his fights with Loveit, like, listeners to the audio drama needed to be, like, concerned, right? And asking themselves the question of, like, is he gonna strangle her or is he gonna go down on her? Like, what's gonna happen next? Because their fights really are that ridiculous. Like, they really do vacillate from, like, really, really ferocious sexual passion to, like, blistering, like white fury. And that seems to be part of the appeal for her. That everything is so grandiose, everything is so extravagant. I think Medley, right? Isn't it Medley that says she's the extravagantest woman I ever knew? And it's what's really lovely about her with Fopling, because Fopling has this like schoolboy crush on Mrs. Loveit, is that in many ways Sir Fopling is the only other character who is that extravagant. It's a different kind of extravagance, but you play an extravagant man, Jamie.
I agree with that. I think that also what's interesting about Fopling, I'm circling around to what I was saying before with the worst parts of him are things that he does while trying to meet societal standards for like masculinity and manhood.
Yeah.
There's one moment where it's talking about writing, like writing poetry, and he very overtly says, he's like, oh no, a man should not write anything longer than a song or a billet. And it's like, no, you write as much as you want. I'm not gonna read it, but you write a lot. You go, Sir Fopling. Come on, buddy. Like, you break away from those standards, man. Come on. You're sweet. You've got a heart. Write your poetry.
When we were doing the Shakespeare Enneagram series, we had talked a little bit, I think when we were on the number 3, which is the achiever, which is very narcissistic and very concerned with artifice, right? Like, and of achieving and being the best. We talked about Merchant of Venice, right? Which on the first day of Man of Mode, I had said to the cast that if Man of Mode had a Shakespearean analog, it would probably be Merchant of Venice. And I mostly stand by that. I just read For Portia yesterday, and I really do think that like these two plays have a lot in common, particularly in the way that they forensically examine the glitterati, like the young glitterati. Because in Merchant, those Venetians are dastards. They're really bad. And even the characters that you want to root for, like Portia, are like racist train wrecks. And I think that, Etheridge is doing a similar kind of excavation of the elite in Man of Mode. But when we had talked about the number 3, I think Jeremy had said that, the Prince of Morocco in Merchant of Venice is arguably the only character in that play that like definitely has a soul. Like, for sure, we can confirm textually this one character, the Prince of Morocco, who's in one scene, has a soul. And I remember asking Jeremy, like, why do you think that is? And like, what does that mean? And he's like, I think he's there in order to show us how much the other ones don't, right? He's there as a kind of embodiment of antithesis. So if we feel queasy about all the other characters and we're like, why are we feeling so queasy about all these others? Then we meet the Prince of Morocco and we're like, oh, because this guy has a heart. And the reason we were feeling weird before is because we haven't met someone with a heart yet, or at least not someone who is like in touch with their heart. And I think that in many ways that is what Sir Fopling offers to this play. When he arrives in Act 3, there is this sense of like, oh, here it is. Okay. So it's not just me, right? Like, these characters aren't just seeming really awful to me. Like, they are actually missing something, or they have shut something off that feels very human, and Sir Fopling is in touch with it. It may be the only thing he's in touch with, but he has access to his own feelings, and he doesn't seem to apologize for them as much. Even though, as Jamie said, he still is very concerned with adhering to many of the benchmarks of masculinity as kind of enforced by the Restoration. It's just that he doesn't do it very well.
Although I will give him that when he is in the moment, yes, he's insufferable, but like the only thing that really separates him in, say, the scenes when Loveit is going along with it, he's pitching some woo, he's trying his best, and if he were, I don't know, more respected, if he were a higher status character, part of me thinks that some of the things that he says, some of the phrases that escape his lips would not actually be so objectionable. It's just the French accent and the way that he speaks around those moments that ruin it for him. but that like he's not incapable.
Yeah.
And I think too that the fact that like I have conversations with Dormant where I explicitly say like I remember the time we spent together. I evoke almost immediately a moment where we were walking in. I have the way to say this right. Tuileries? Tuileries? I have it written down correctly. We were in a place in France, and a French noble lady saw him and mistook him for a handsome Frenchman, and then they flirted. And Claire, we discussed that after that he probably went and hooked up with that French noble lady.
Yep.
But I, as the earnest gentleman I am, assume every romance that Dormant enters is going to end in marriage and long-term matrimony and a family, and I'm going to be the uncle, and I'm going to show up, and I'm
Uncle
going
Fopling.
to buy clothes for the children, and it's going to be wonderful.
Yeah.
And Dormant is, of course, like, no, never like that. It's never going to be like that. And I'm like, you are staying realistic, but we both know this is the one. You and me, we are friends and close. And he will look me in the eyes and be like, I hate you. And I'll be like, I love you too. Yes.
Yeah.
The ability to stonewall and love unconditionally these terrible people is his power.
Absolutely.
So we've been working on this play now for 3 weeks. And we're about to, literally later today, we have dry tech. We have our first recording session with Audacity. Our wonderful editor, Wesley Johnson, will be joining us, that he can give a listen and start to give me feedback on how we're going to turn this thing into a fully immersive radio play. So the process is getting down to sort of its final stretch. And of course, we have our, send-off, farewell, live Zoom performance where the actors get to share this play with a live audience on Saturday, December 19th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, which is very exciting. I know this is kind of your first dalliance with restoration comedy, Cassie. Jamie, you did Way of the World with me, but we did Way of the World in 10 days, and I didn't know what I was doing, so I don't know if it really counts. Although I will say your Whitwood was far and away one of my favorite things about that process, and I thought you were a phenomenal Whitwood.
Thanks.
And I very much liked our scenes together. But I'm curious for the two of you, like, what has been maybe a really great challenge of working on Man of Mode in particular, and or your character? Like, what's been challenging about this play? And then we'll sort of veer from that into, like, what's been something that's been really exciting to discover, or something that you really liked about this play.
Well, I have an immediate answer while Cassie gathers what I assume is a much more eloquent thing than what I'm about to say, which is the Frenchness, the speaking French, the French accent. It is not the antithesis. Like, I can joke around and do a French accent, but being like, I need to be a consistent character who is doing a French accent, and I have to do it well enough that it's not that bad, but also I can be good. Just finding that balance of what does his voice sound like, and then how do I return to that voice every time and make it better, and also speak French using this bad accent, but not sound like I don't speak any French.
Right.
I'm an actor. That's my job. But it added an extra layer of awareness and work that I needed to do within the language that was not related to even what I was saying. It was just how I was saying it. And I feel like for something like Whitwood, or for other plays that we've done together, even if there's an accent, I've always been given accents that I feel naturally comfortable with. So to approach the language and have to add this extra layer of like, oh God, I've never done this before. It's definitely been it's been an adventure, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's been frustrating at times, but I have had wonderful French speakers in the cast, and you, Claire, to guide me and make sure that I am being serviceably bad.
If we were doing this show, like, I will stage this Sunday, because Jamie needs to play Sir Fopling for me, like, for real, so he can do all the solo dances that Sir Fopling does. But I think that we will have cast epitaphs. Like, we'll have little designators under all of the headshots, and Sir Fopling's will be serviceably bad. That's the best way I can think to describe who and what this character is. He's serviceably bad.
I should get that tattooed right across.
No, and you've been doing such beautiful work, and honestly, I will never ever forget, as long as I live, our first read for this play, because I had told Jamie way back when that I wanted him to play Sir Fopling, and I'd kind of described the character to him, but I definitely didn't. You cannot hold me to this, Jamie. I did not stipulate that you had to do the French accent. I said it would be funny if you could. I didn't say you had to. The way I described
fair enough.
The way I described it to Jamie is I was like, "Can you do like an almost offensively bad like Lumiere French accent?" And he was like, "I don't know, maybe." And then we sort of left it there. Then on the day of first read, I do my like podium shtick about how I don't want anyone using dialects. I want these characters to live in our own voices and bodies, because that is our right as contemporary classical theater performers. And to try to affect dialect, I think sometimes it just reifies like old, white, gross hierarchical paradigms that I'm just not interested in. And so I don't like it. And I give this little mini sermon, and then Jamie raises his hand and he goes, "Am I accepted from that?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." By the time we got to Sir Fopling, I had already taken so many notes about all the other characters. We got to Act 3. I wasn't even thinking about Sir Fopling, and I was looking down when Jamie did his first line. And I think my head snapped up so hard I got like a crick in my neck. I was crying with laughter. I was like, "Oh my God, he's going to do the entire character this way." I really thought that like if you were going to do it, you would just whip it out like on occasion. And I was like, "Oh no, he's like practiced. He's going to do the whole character with this like." Oh God, it's just like, it's the cheesiest Parisian nonsense. And it's so marvelous. And when you listen to it in an audio drama, you will, I just think you'll just laugh immediately, but also you will totally know who Sir Fopling is. Like there will be no question when his character has arrived. And I'm so grateful to you, Jamie, for adding on top of just the typical work you have to do as a voice actor of like, how am I going to convey as much of this character as possible through my voice alone, with intentionality and emotionality and sort of clarity, that you also add this sheen of Frenchness around it that takes this additional layer of work. It means so much to me, and I can attest that the final result is truly delicious. So
thank you.
Yeah,
I will try to keep it delicious and not get too far out of my my rehearsal zone, because I think I've kind of cropped it a little bit. I've managed to bring it down enough, because that first read in particular, I was barely paying attention to the language. I was just like, French accent, here we go. And now I feel like I can kind of breathe, and I can feel myself finding those moments of oh, I'm gonna replace the S sound with a Z sound. I'm gonna this. I don't have to like stare and go, I'm going to do this, and then hit it. I can just kind of focus more on, I think, the more important thing, which is what is being said and why. Right. That's a little bit important, especially in a play, to understand, especially restoration stuff.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there are some great actors who I've seen do restoration or Shakespeare or whatever. It just who they're just talking, and I go, oh, your delivery is great. You have no idea what you're saying.
Yep.
And so for this in particular, I'm like, oh God, I can't be like that. I need to know what I'm saying. And so finding or making my French accent less the focus of my character and more part of me knowing what I'm saying. It's because a lot of his lines, I couldn't do it without a French accent. There are moments where I get to take a comedic beat because I'm struggling with an English word, even though he's not really English, or even though he's not really French. And I don't know. I don't know how I would play some of those beats without the ability to kind of stretch it out or say it with an extra ow at the end, kind of add that extra glottal stop, guttural noise as part of his awful French accent. And because when you do that too, people go, oh my God, here comes this guy. Well, I don't get to walk in wearing all this extravagant stuff. I don't get to do my dance. What I have is my voice.
Yeah.
And what I have is the sound I make when I enter. And this is not to say I still want to be listenable. I don't want the audience to be like, oh God, oh no, he's coming back. Oh, I have to listen. Just skip.
That will not happen.
But I do want the other characters to feel that way.
Yeah.
And so it's that balance. It is all about all about balancing the bad with the intentionally bad.
And you're absolutely striking it, and it's working wonders on Ron's Dormant. Like, I can literally see his skin crawl through the Zoom screen when Sir Fopling arrives. It's magnificent. And I really, again, I just really appreciate that work. I see it and I hear it, and it's the amount of time and effort that it must have taken you and continues to take you to like really hone it is not lost on me. And as your director, like, I just need to express my own deep gratitude and like affirmation of it, because it is totally working.
Thank you.
Yes, it's going to be marvelous. Cassie, what about you? What's been challenging for you about this play and Loveit?
I have two things for each category. I hope that's okay, and I'll make it. So you asked for something we kind of are delighted by and that we love about this work and this play, and then you asked for a challenging thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'll start with the challenging thing for me. One of those is character based, and another one is based in the genre of the work that we're doing in terms of the voice work.
Mm-hmm.
And the character challenge for me with Mrs. Loveit is I just keep getting these notes from my director about like, I need to be a little meaner. I need to be a little bit more like aggressive. The intention needs to be to hurt Dormant as we're fighting as lovers. And that's not a type of relationship that I've been in real life.
Mm-hmm.
For me, accessing that, the logic behind that and the drive for Mrs. Loveit behind why would she be acting this way? Why would she be like, I can't even imagine a world where I'm screaming at the person I love having a screaming match, right? That's just not something I personally have gone through, luckily. But we call her relationship toxic in our rehearsal room, and it's absolutely true for most of Dormant's relationships. And accessing that has been tough. And it's been a rewarding challenge to be working at as an actor. So that's hard. The other thing that's been challenging that I really also love is we are doing this work ultimately to be recorded. So much of that genre of like the audio drama, it's newer to everybody now that we're doing so much work over Zoom these days. And so it's been like, I've done a couple other projects where we've recorded it and put it in a podcast or done like an audio version of it. And to really convey through your voice, you still as an actor, through like miles and screens, you still need to feel everything for it to come through in the audio, I think. And you can tell when actors are doing that and when they're not. You can feel it as an audience member, even through all these mediums that we're recording. So having to just remember that I'm alone in my office at home, and oftentimes in sweatpants and sitting down at a chair and not in a room with other people and not in a room with an audience to react to any of the work. And yet you still have to drive that forward because it really matters for the end result. So that's a challenge to continue to press as we go towards recording. And then something that I really loved about this process, I really love classic works. I love working on Shakespeare. I love working on well-made plays. I love working on Ibsen's and Chekhov's, sort of anything that's sort of like an elevated language, that's an extra level as an actor to be able to like translate those things and really play with the subtext of the lines. That's been really delightful, and especially a second part to that with the dramaturgical work we've done in the room with Misty, our dramaturg, sort of dramaturg liaison. Is that her title officially?
She's our resident dramaturg. She's here for the whole long project.
Yeah, so we have this dramaturg named Misty, and she teaches as well at a university, and she's just been absolutely amazing in terms of providing historical context. I've gotten to learn a lot about the genre of restoration theater through Misty and through Claire, and that's been really rewarding. And I've just loved pairing that with like this language that that's very delightful to use and to play with. You don't get to very often as an actor. So that's been mine.
Yay! Thank you. I'm so glad to hear it. I mean, I love Restoration Theater so much. Shocker. This is like
Really?
This is what I love. And Jamie gives me so much crap about it, but I do love it. I love it with all my heart and soul, and I really do feel like this is my material, and I'm so grateful that I have these incredible actors like Jamie and Cassie who are willing to go down the rabbit hole of discovery and examination with me. Because I really do agree with Cass that like the language here it's unlike language you find in theater from any other time in English history, and it is quite daunting to perform Restoration Theater, as Simon Cowell says, is a marathon. You have to prepare yourself for a marathon when you prepare yourself to do a whole show. But it's so rewarding when you get it right. Like the language will just catapult you into the world of these characters, not just the extremes of their emotions, but really like the quirks and qualities of the world that they inhabit. You really find yourself in their world through the heightened, ornate, overly complicated prose that they speak to each other. And I agree. And shout out to Dr. Misty Anderson, head of English at the University of Tennessee, co-founder of the R18 Collective, and the resident dramaturg of the DRS. She's our hero. She's absolutely brilliant. We've been so lucky to have her in the room for all these projects. And she has done wonders of like manifesting the reality of this work and the historicism of it for the cast. Jamie, what has been something or some things that have been delightful for you about the play and or your character?
Well, I wish I had added this when I was talking about it, because it's also the French accent. It's been great. Like that's I as Cassie was saying, both of hers, I was like, oh dang it, I didn't mention that I meant in a good way and a bad way the stuff about the French accent. But also what I said earlier too, I can definitely bring up the fact that I get to be the earnest one.
Yeah.
I mean, not that I feel like this is for my whole life. I definitely get typecast because frankly, I was a real life fop in like high school. I can name situations where I walked into a situation, I wanted to be friends with everyone, and then I would walk out, and like 3 weeks later, I'm like, oh my God, none of those people liked me. Oh, I was just talking. Oh no. And and that's growing up with Tourette's. That's growing up being just a nerdy dork. But I just experiencing that. I was always so focused on dealing with my Tourette's syndrome that I could just walk into a situation and kind of go with my gut because I know I'm supposed to be social, but like approaching it. And I don't know, I have great empathy for Sir Fopling. I have a deep, profound empathy for this character.
Yeah.
And so getting to embody him with empathy is I think important. Yeah. I think that with any foppish character, with any weirdo, with any dork, I took a class in college, with Murray Schwartz called Shakespearean Exclusion, which was about all the characters who get like left out during the final parts of. So you talk about Malvolio, you talk about other characters that now are leaving my brain, but you understand the concept. And I think that Fopling, I mean, Sir Fopling is there in the middle of the play, and then he goes, I am going to go and take a bath.
And then he
goes and takes a bath.
Yeah.
Yes. End of the play. And he does show up. He does get kind of closure, but not really. Fopling is kind of brushed aside at the very end, and he's present. No one is making him leave, but yeah, I get to be him, and I get to be a human being as him, because those weirdos who these archetypes are born out of are human beings in real life. And some of them aren't obscenely wealthy and affluent and well-dressed. Some of them are just weirdos who get excluded, and that's the end of their story.
Yep.
And I think that all of those people being represented, all of the weirdos who people are like, this guy, but then you actually pay attention and you're like, oh, they're not that bad. I mean, they're pretty bad, but they're not that bad. He's.
I have a question for you about Fopling and Malvolio, this sort of like draw that you did between them, because I've been reminded of Malvolio from Twelfth Night, who is like the fop in Twelfth Night, I would say. Claire, would you call him that? Right?
I don't know. I think he serves a similar function to a fop, but I think Sir Andrew Aguecheek is actually the fop, and I think that Malvolio is like, he's another, but I think Jamie's right, he's another kind of outsider. He's another kind of like anti-establishment figure.
Yeah, I was going to say he's reminded me of Malvolio in some ways and then not others.
Mm-hmm.
Kinder, sweeter.
The being led on is
Frencher.
definitely.
He's much Frencher.
Yeah, but with like the ornate clothing, and there's that one scene with Malvolio with the stockings, and I don't think that they serve exactly the same function in their stories, but they do have a similar outcome. And I've been thinking about this draw. Do you feel more of that, Jamie, as you've worked on Fopling?
Absolutely. I think that connecting him to someone like Sir Andrew would be an immediate gut reaction. But yeah, I think that honestly, if we were really doing it, I would just mix the two. I would say he is a combination of Sir Andrew's cluelessness and kind of earnest love with Malvolio's tendency to come in and kind of stop everything.
Yeah.
Or if he tries to involve himself, mess it up anyway. Because, like, you know, people would go out for a drink with Sir Andrew. People would not go out for a drink with Malvolio.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it, actually. I mean, that class sounds fantastic. That class
it was wonderful. Murray Schwartz retired, and he is wonderful. He lives in Massachusetts with his wife, and they have a little library out front of their house. I know this because there was an article about it. It's great. Love you, Murray Schwartz.
I hope Schwartz is watching.
Yes, honestly, or listening. Hopefully he'll download the podcast and then he can enjoy this. Shout out to him. I'll definitely send it to Misty so she can hear us talking about how great she is. All of the podcasts I've been doing recently about the DRS at some point, like, circle back to, well, we're all here for the grace of Misty Anderson. Which is true. I don't begrudge that. It's absolutely accurate. You know,
in our performance. You will see the work of Claire and Misty combined in the performance, like, very clearly. The reason why you as an audience will understand this play, we help, but like, it's really Misty and Claire that are clarifying everything to us as the actors to where we can really tell it to you. And I think you'll notice that if you like really get what's going on, it's because of Claire and Misty.
Thank you. I hope that's true. I think that the clarity of the storytelling is top notch and extraordinarily crystalline for a play and a genre that is so famously convoluted. And I felt the same way about Way of the World. I felt the same way about Rover. You know, as Jamie said, at the end of the day, just understanding what these characters are even freaking saying underneath all the clauses and forsooths, that's the most important thing. And then all of the artifice can be sort of, it can decorate the outside of it, you know, like potpourri. You know, I think Jamie brings up a really good point, though, right, about how at the end of the day he's playing a real person, which, despite all my laughter at Sir Fopling's expense, is the truth and is actually my way into all classical texts, but especially Restoration theater. I hold this truth to be self-evident, that every character in a Restoration play is a real human, and you have to treat them as such, both as an actor, and actors are inherently better at this than production people are. Sometimes we can be rather cynical and dismissive, but like, I have to, as the director, approach every single character as a real person, no matter how absurd and contrived their name might be, right? If it's a servant called Pert, like, yes, it's a joke, but also, like, Pert is a person, and I have to think about her that way, and I have to treat her that way. And I have to endow all of the characters, from the serving men without names all the way up to our most sort of formidable dames, the same kind of emotional investment and commitment to their truth and authenticity in the world. And when we did Way of the World, I only had 18 hours of rehearsal before we started recording that, which is batshit insane for a play that complicated. So what I did was I made this really elaborate timeline where I just went back to like the birth of the oldest character, which was Lady Wishford, and I just like plotted out basically what has happened in the like 50 years leading up to the Way of the World's events. And as we get closer, those timelines gets more and more sort of detailed. And the reason I did that, it was every bit for me as much as it was for the actors, because I, in making the timeline, had to treat all of the characters like real people. I had to imagine what it would be like to actually live their lives and move through the world, despite all of the ostentatious nuttiness of how they present. And that really, I think it really...
The way of...
Yeah, I think it really worked. Like, I think it really like did something to the group. I think we all felt like we were playing people, even though the circumstances were so elaborate and over the top. And Jamie, I think, is wonderful proof of how really, really good actors and empathetic humans can make the most ridiculous seeming character profoundly human and relatable and accessible. Cassie is also marvelous at this. These are, I didn't just pick these two randomly. I love them. They're two of my dearest friends, but they are also two of the best actors I know, and I've been so lucky to get to work with them. But Jamie has, sort of proven time and again that there is no such thing as a character you can or should write off, no matter how ridiculous they appear. And that is why when I was approaching a text that it follows a character who is like the perennial outsider in War and Peace, I wrote it for Jamie because I knew that Jamie would prove to me, just in reading the text out loud, that Pierre is a human, right? And that we have to think about him as such. So I definitely recommend going to sweetteashakespeare.com/tickets, checking out our event for The Man of Mode by George Etheridge, our live Zoom performance, where you will get to see these two wonderful creatures doing their work with the full cast, is on Saturday, December 19th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. It's a lot of fun. Our performance for the Rover had a gigantic turnout, and it was so much fun all around. We're creating a drinking game, just like we did for the Rover. So if you're watching with alcohol, you can play the drinking game of Man of Mode. And
don't drink every time I do a bad French accent, or you'll die.
you'll drink yourself under the table. We'll pick out some specific Foplingisms, and then those will go into the drinking game. Our amazing assistant stage manager,
I know
Emma
one.
Kelly, is going to be making this for us.
When Loveit breaks her fan,
finish a drink.
Anytime Loveit's voice gets above 15 decibels, you have to take a shot. It's going to be a lot of fun. I definitely recommend it, if only to see the vibrant and beautiful work of these two extraordinary artists. Cassie and Jamie, thank you so much for joining me today. It was so great chatting with you both.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us today. It was fun. I can't wait to perform this and have people see it.
It's going to be really awesome.
It is going to be an experience, and then we will keep giving me French accents until the end of time, until I become French for real.
Something we can all look forward to.
Yes.
To anyone out there who's joined us, thank you so much for being here. And we hope to see you at the show Saturday, December 19th, The Man of Mode. It's going to be awesome. Friends, have a great rest of your day. Bye.